Again, good morning, everybody. Today's topic, we have Pablos Holman on the topic of innovating project management through technology. And this falls under the integration management within the PMBOK PM knowledge area. And today, what we'll be discussing, Pablos has 30 minutes of prepared content, and then we'll open it up for questions after that. And Ian will help us moderate the session as before, as in the past. Today, we will be talking about how emerging technologies and innovative approaches, such as AI, big data, and cybersecurity, can be integrated into the project management process to enhance our efficiency, decision-making, and overall project success. And I know at UCLA Health IT, we have embarked on several AI initiatives outside of the PM area in the the patient-facing applications, but in the project management tool like UPlan and APT and other tools that we have, the vendor is also trying to incorporate AI. So please feel free to, during the session, post your questions on the chat or ask verbally if you have any questions related to technology and project management and how we can leverage this, or how the future landscape looks for project management using some of these technologies. Just to give you a background on Pablos, he's a hacker, inventor, and a technology futurist, and he has a unique ability to distill complex technology into actual practical tools that we can use. And he has over 70 patents, and he's worked on many projects. You can mute your phone. He's worked on many projects, including cryptocurrency, AI for stock market, and also in the building of the spaceship at Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin, and also worked on the world's smallest PC and 3D printers. And he helped start the Intellectual Ventures Lab that supports a variety of invention projects, which included developing a brain surgery tool, a machine to suppress hurricanes. It's all fascinating. Please feel free to ask questions on some of these technologies that he worked on. And a nuclear reactor powered by nuclear waste, and a machine that can shoot mosquitoes out of the sky with lasers to fight malaria as part of the Bill Gates Foundation. And as I mentioned, he has over 70 patents under his name. And he's a renowned expert in 3D printing, artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, automated manufacturing, and crypto. And he has worked across all of the domains, contributing to the vision of how some of these domains would look like in the future. And due to his expertise and background, he's sought after at all of the top conferences around the world. And he has also...
okay, that's enough.
One last one.
I've heard enough about me.
Yeah, one last one. The TED Talks, he has over 30 million views.
Okay.
With that, I'll turn it over to Pablos.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Hopefully that works. All right, you guys got that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, you guys. I have a lot of things I want to share, so my plan is to talk real fast, and then we'll get through this, and then we can try and really focus on the project management implications and things after that. So just first, I always like to start by sort of orienting ourselves. So if you can find yourself on this chart, you'll get a sense of, really where we're at. About 160,000 years ago, you get the first Homo sapiens on Earth, but then it took a long time to get to millions, and it's really just the last 200 years when we went from millions to billions. And it's very important to understand it's this curve that defines everything we're experiencing in the world today. As far as we know, this has never been done before. This is what exponential really means. You and I exist because along the way, we humans invented new technologies that could help us solve at least partially, some of the problems that had kept humans from thriving. And that's things like, how do you feed all these people? How do you give them jobs and homes? 400 million people died of smallpox before we invented vaccination. So those were big challenges for humans. And now we're at this point where we've got 8 billion humans. And so far, the main thing they seem to be good for is making more problems. So we've got to figure out, how are we going to invent new technologies, bring them into the world that help us solve problems at that scale. And it's an exciting challenge. And the good news is we're in a better position than ever to be able to do that. And we have a really extraordinary toolkit, but it's not totally clear that we're going to win. So we should try harder. So the one thing I think is very important to get our heads around is that we are all made of stars. Now, that's not just song lyrics, like we're literally made of this star. All the energy in the world comes from the sun. And that's not just solar power and, photosynthesis to grow the stuff that feeds you. It is also the coal, the oil, the gas, and the ground. That all comes from the sun. The only energy that didn't come from the sun is uranium, which comes from other stars. So, it's very important from a fundamental perspective to keep track of the fact that all these people require energy. And the average person on Earth gets about as much energy as one toaster. So if you duct tape the button down on your toaster, run it 24 hours a day, that's how much energy all the heating, cooling, travel, food for an average person on Earth gets. Most of us are Americans, so we get 8 bonus toasters. Now, that means that we have been lying to ourselves about the true demand for energy on planet Earth. And this is true because no oil company has ever advertised gas. They're the biggest industry in the world. They don't have to advertise their product because they know the demand is unlimited. Nobody ever tries to get you to buy more gas. There's no TV ads telling you to buy gas. That is because demand is extreme. Supply is limited. To get these averages, 3 billion people live on less than one toaster. So the true demand for energy on planet Earth is about 10x global energy production. And you've never heard anyone say that before because we are all lying to you. People are showing you a demand curve that shows a few percent a year of growth in demand. That's not true. That's a few percent a year of growth in availability and supply. So we really need to figure out, how are we going to solve these problems at a much larger scale? And it sounds crazy, but we've done it before. So if you look over the last century, we 10x global energy production. And we did it the hard way by digging it all up out of the ground, more coal, oil, and gas. Now, hopefully we learned our lesson and we don't want to 10x with those things. We actually want to go find cleaner, better, cheaper ways of 10xing, but it is going to be easier this time, and hopefully it won't take us a century. So a good example of this is solar panels. Now, solar panels, they have 2 big problems. We all love them, but they have 2 big problems: clouds and nighttime. Now, the relentless onslaught of night seems to be an unsolvable problem for solar panels. So every day what's happening is it gets dark and we turn on the coal plant. So when you build a solar farm or a wind farm, nobody talks about this, but you actually have to also go build a coal plant or an oil or gas plant to run when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. I'll give you real proof here. This is, I like to pick on Germans because they were the smartest engineers when I was a kid. Now they look like the dumbest. Here's why. That orange line is installed capacity for solar in Germany. So this is the number you'll see in the press that everybody's bragging about. They're up to 40, 50 gigawatts now of installed solar capacity. The blue line shows you how much energy is actually generated from that installed capacity. And you can see that in the summer, they get almost 20% of the installed capacity out of those solar panels. Fun fact, though, in the winter in Germany, the sun don't shine. So you can see that there in the winter, it goes down to like 3% of the installed capacity is how much actual energy they're getting from this. Nobody talks about these numbers. This is the real data. So we are not going to save the world with solar panels, right? This is lying to ourselves. And we have to get smarter about how we do that. Now, here's an example. If you take the solar panels and put them up in space, they actually get 8 times as much energy. They'll get sun 24 hours a day, and then you can beam that energy down to Earth using radio waves. Now, hardly anybody's ever talked about this kind of idea. It sounds like science fiction, but it's actually totally practical. We have all the technologies to do this. It's actually pretty easy to do. And the only hard part about it has been launch cost, but the launch cost for putting stuff in space is now down dramatically because of SpaceX. And so this decade we'll be able to do space-based solar power, and it will be cheaper than any other type of energy. It'll be base load energy, meaning it's 24 hours a day. You don't need storage and you don't need transmission lines because you can beam it to each city. That's an example of a way that we could 10x global energy production in our lifetime. I grew up in Alaska in the cold with nothing else to do, but I got one of the first computers you could have at home. And my whole life I've been, excited about like what these new technologies could do for us. And, as a kid in Alaska, nobody had ever seen a computer. I had the only one. And so I would try to get people to come and take a look at this thing and explain to them how cool it was. And nobody thought it was cool at all. In fact, I had this computer and I had a skateboard, and people thought the skateboard was a better waste of time than the computer. So it was early days, but Revenge of the Nerds, I was right. And eventually they got useful. I was fantasizing about getting my hands on something like this, a Cray XMP, which had 400 megaflops. And now you're hauling around 2 teraflops in your pocket, and we don't even know what to do with it. We're not computationally constrained at this point. We are imagination constrained. We all have access to giant supercomputers. You can rent them by the minute from Amazon, and we don't know what to do with them. So I made up this totally fake slide, which is useless. It's all lies, except that you guys have used Excel to make charts and graphs before, like this, right? And what I want you to think about is Excel is literally what I call small data. Just take Excel, drag it into the trash, empty the trash, tell your boss I said you could do that. This is not what computers are for. This is just what they used to be good for. Now this is pointless. A spreadsheet is just a simplistic computational model of something, and we don't do that anymore. These days, we use giant supercomputers to make large-scale computational models. And I kind of want to explain how that works. So if you think of a spreadsheet is a computational model. It's a data structure. Each cell in the spreadsheet is a value. It's a number, right? A photo in Instagram is the exact same thing. Here we have a photo of my daughter. She's made up of pixels. Each pixel is a value. What the value is what color is that pixel, right? You got it. Same thing. Pictures and spreadsheets are the same thing. Now, if I'm going to run a filter in Instagram, then maybe I'm going to make this picture into black and white or higher contrast or sharper focus or something. So what's going to happen is we're going to run a filter. A filter is the exact same thing as a formula in a spreadsheet, right? In a spreadsheet, a formula is like, A2 plus B2 equals. A formula in Instagram is I'm going to change the color of this pixel. Now I got to compute what effect does that have on the 8 pixels around it. Well, shit. Now I got to compute what happens to the 8 pixels around each of those. And you have this giant cascading exponential computation to do. That's why it's hard. That's why it was so difficult to do this stuff for our whole lifetime, because we were computationally constrained. Now We do not have that problem. Now computers can do this instantly. That's why your kids are turning themselves into moose and bunny rabbits, you know, speculatively in Snapchat, because they're just wasting computation for lack of a better use. So I'm just explaining this stuff because I don't want it to be mysterious. We're constantly using, you know, machine learning, artificial intelligence, neural networks, you know, gradient descent, all these fancy terms to make us sound super smart. This is actually very simple. All we're talking about is computational models. And these models you can understand because you've been using Excel, you've been using Instagram. So what happens in one of these things is we're just going to run that filter. If we're talking about artificial intelligence, it's the exact same thing, except now, instead of a pixel that's a color, it's data about the world, right? And it's so much data no human could ever parse it. And the formula that became a filter is now called an algorithm, same thing, but the algorithm is miles long, and it's miles long because we used neural networks to generate them. What does that mean? That means we had the computer basically randomize a bunch of algorithms, try them all, throw out the ones that suck, keep doing that until you find one that works pretty well. That's what neural nets are. I know we sound super smart, like we have PhDs. It doesn't matter. All it is computers randomizing algorithms. So now we've got one that works, and we just keep going with that. So, but that algorithm is so long and complicated that no human could ever understand what it's doing, but it works better. And that is really the difference when we're talking about machine learning. We're talking about a state of affairs where the relationship between correlation and causation has flipped. In a spreadsheet like Excel, you can go look at the formula and sort of understand what's happening. You know, oh, if I change this cell, the bottom line changes. But in machine learning, it's so much data and such complicated algorithms that you can't understand how the computer got that answer, even though it's a better answer. And that's really the inflection point that we are living through right now, is getting comfortable with this, you know, learning to trust and understand the computers, even though we don't actually understand how they're doing their job. So these days we have giant supercomputers. You know, I built this one, which has 5,000 cores and a lot of blinking blue lights, and they're super cool, but no reason you need one of these because we can just rent them online. Everybody can get access to a supercomputer. And what we use them for is these large scale computational models. So I want to give you a real world example. We made them for epidemiology. So this is an example of a computational model on the spread of disease in Africa. Here it's a model for malaria. And malaria, you know, has a whole bunch of factors that affect it. So we have data on climate and rainfall and the travel of humans and all the different things that can affect the spread of the disease. That goes in this big simulation that allows us to project out years into the future. If you go, this is Madagascar, which is just an island off of Africa. If you go to Madagascar, you should probably go to the middle. That's where the people still are. In the rainy season, malaria covers almost the entire island. And then in the dry season, it goes away almost completely. So what we can do with these models is we can see years into the future how the disease is going to spread. But then we can test our interventions. We can try thousands of variations in software before we ever do it in the real world, right? And that is the superpower we didn't have before. In our entire history, humans could only run one grand experiment, the one we ran in the real world. Now we can run thousands in software. We can see our possible futures and choose from that which one we want to go for. And that is a fundamentally different relationship with decision making than we've ever had before. And that's what's so exciting, because now we can see where we're going. This is the first Ebola outbreak. 12,000 lives were lost, right? In the second Ebola outbreak, only 12 lives were lost. Think about that for a minute. Why is that? Partly because using computational models like this, we were able to optimize the ring vaccination campaign, how we deploy our vaccination resources, and contain that disease before it spread. That is what would have been possible with COVID. we weren't trying. So we have millions and millions of lives lost because we did not apply these tools. We did not use the abilities that we have to make better decisions. And so going forward, we need to understand these toolkits and put them to good use. Humans are story-powered creatures, right? You have a model in your head. That model is the accumulation of all the stories you've heard in your life, that you've witnessed, that you've read, that you've experienced. You create a model. Every one of us has a model of the world in our heads. They're all informed by different things. You know, we all have a different model, and that's why we behave differently in those things, right? We each have our own model, and we're constantly improving it and tuning it and expanding it and that kind of thing. But those models determine our decision making, right? And when we get the models wrong, we make the wrong decisions. You know, before we were born, humans got a lot of scary stories in their heads. They conflated nuclear bombs with nuclear reactors, and we outlawed the wrong one, right? If we had built nuclear reactors, you never would have heard of global warming. But we conflated them with nuclear bombs. We got mushroom clouds in our heads. We got the wrong story in our heads. And we went on the wrong track in history. And we are now living with the consequences. And we're just at the beginning of starting to course correct on that story. It takes generations sometimes to change the story in our minds and start making better decisions. You know, here's another example. You know, we outlawed all the psychedelic drugs in the 60s, 70s, 80s before we understood them. We outlawed them. We outlawed research, and we failed to understand this technology that we're now finding is one of the only ways to help some people with certain types of problems and traumas and things, right? And we're at the beginning of researching these things now, but we threw generations under the bus because we outlawed something we didn't understand. It's very important to understand this process because we are now trying to do the same thing with what we call AI, right? We're trying to outlaw something we're scared of. We don't even know why we're scared. We have these crazy stories in our head of Hollywood having killer robots that turn us into paper clips and all this bullshit. We have these stories in our head that are unsubstantiated. And we're going to try and make decisions off of a fantasy instead of off of reality. And so this is a very scary moment because that same toolkit that I just showed you, we can use to save millions of lives. We want to outlaw it because we're scared of some fantasy. You know, my daughter, when she was a kid, would play with cars, and she had this like map on the ground, and she had, you know, her life experience was like driving around in the car, driving to school, driving home, all those things, driving to dinner. You know, she got excited about cars, and she would play with cars, and she would drive them around and have these stories in her head, right? Sim City is a great example, right? You guys may or may not have played Sim City, but in Sim City, you go make a city and you make a bunch of decisions and you get to try a bunch of different things and see how it plays out. Why don't we have Sim City for Los Angeles? It makes no sense. We should try all these things in software before we do them in Los Angeles, and you would get much better results. And that's true for every other city as well. That is what is possible now. We are at the beginning. I showed you we're doing this with epidemiology. That's not fiction. We've been doing that for 15 years. We advise that project advises over 75 different countries on how to deploy their vaccination resources. We still don't have a model to try and figure out, you know, where we should be farming homeless people in Los Angeles to optimize that process. So look, you know, we've been using AI for a long time. The first AIs that speak English came out last year, so now we're getting excited about them. But the truth is, you've been, you know, Google Maps is an AI you've been using every day for almost 15 years now, right? This is an AI. You put in your destination, it figures out possible routes to your destination. It draws a blue line showing you how to get there. It draws a couple gray lines for alternative routes. If, you know, you hit traffic or you know, decide you want to stop and pick up a burger on the way home, it's going to recalculate. This is an AI. It is showing you your possible futures. It is taking into account whatever data it has to help you make the best decision. I think Google Maps is a much better example for most people. And when we go back to the kind of project management view of the world, don't think about LLMs, forget them. Think about Google Maps. Where is the Google map for me if I get hit by a bus on my bicycle and I break my arm? There ought to be a Google map that shows me my route to 100% recovery. This ambulance is going to pick you up. It's the closest one. It's going to take you to this ER. It's the closest one that has availability. This is the doctor who's going to see you. This is the X-ray tech who's going to take the images. This is the radiologist who's going to look at those images. This is the doctor who's going to make the recommendation for what happens to you. Most people who break their arm, it takes this much time to recover. You're going to need this much physical therapy. These are the highest rated physical therapists in your neighborhood. Where is that shit? Like, that's what we should have for everything, right? So if we're talking about the future of healthcare, that's where it goes. We're much more likely to get it in Saudi Arabia or China than here, but you get the idea. We're supposed to be able to use these tools to help us make better decisions, to show us our possible futures. Think about Google Maps when you think about how things should work in the future. Almost everything that we do, we should be able to see a blue line to success. We should be able to see a couple gray lines that are alternatives, and we should be able to navigate. When I think about AI right now, I made my first AI company in the year 2000. We made AIs that could read the news and trade stocks because it was an easy way to get rich. 0% of trading was done by computers in those days. Now it's like 98%. So look, I think that, we're at a point now where people are spun up about AI because there's one that they can relate to. That's what the language models are. But that is really only an example that humans can understand. The truth is, you should not ask ChatGPT to drive you home. It's happy to try, but it doesn't know how to get home. It doesn't have a map. It doesn't have, ask Google Maps how to get home. It's an AI built for that. Don't let it drive your car. It would happily try. Do not let ChatGPT drive you home. Farm that out to Tesla. They have an AI that knows how to drive. So what you want going forward is a multitude of what we call AIs, but they're literally just computational models. And again, already just to beat you over the head, a computational model is the same thing as a picture in Instagram. It is the same thing as a spreadsheet. So you can understand these things. Don't be intimidated by PhD assholes. You can understand these things, and we can all build these things. So that's where it's going. Look, if you have an iPhone in your pocket, the cost of that thing is equivalent to the global median income, right? I'm not trying to make you feel bad. You should have an iPhone, and you should drive a Tesla, and you should help us waste a lot of money on all this cool new tech because we need to figure out which of it is good, right? And we need to figure out which of it needs to be scaled for the rest of the world. But we're at the beginning on that. In Silicon Valley, we have this kind of religion that we call scratch and itch. And scratch and itch basically means, find some problem you have. Your friends probably have the same problem. It's like budget market research. But this is why kids in San Francisco are making iPhone apps to have weed delivered to their dorm room. They've run out of problems, right? And it's time to take on the bigger problems in the world. It's good practice, make a startup, make an iPhone app, but then figure out how do you take on a problem that you don't have, that like a billion people have. It's harder, but that's where the action is. Here's an example. This guy is, got $100,000 worth of vaccines in coolers strapped to his bicycle, and he's headed out into the bush in, Southeast Asia somewhere to inject kids to vaccinate them against diseases that are killing them off. And this is literally the front lines of vaccination. We save millions of lives a year doing this. But what we don't talk about often is that 250,000 kids a year die of something they were vaccinated against. So we invented the vaccine, we tested it, we manufactured it, we got it onto a boat, we shipped it halfway around the world, we got onto that bicycle, got it out to the bush, injecting kids, and still a quarter of them fail. It's unconscionable. And the reason is they didn't stay cold. And they don't stay cold because these places don't have refrigerators. They don't have power for the refrigerators. And so these vaccines spoil their live cultures. So, we invented this thing. It's a kind of super thermos. You can put vaccines in there, stick it in the sunshine, in the desert, come back a couple months later, and your vaccines will still be cold. There's no power cord, like it just stays cold. This is literally the deployment scenario. You strap this R2D2 looking thing to a camel, you walk for a couple days out into the bush in like rural Ethiopia, set up a clinic, which is literally like a tree with a doctor under it, injecting kids. And then, this is literally how we save these lives. And, it wasn't that hard for us. I mean, our team worked on it real hard, but they got PhDs in biology and chemistry and physics. Like, a lot has been invested in us. We know how to do these things, but we had to go there. We had to sit with these folks, understand the problem, and try to come up with viable solutions. And that's easier for us, presumably, than some of the folks who are in this environment. So look, I know I'm bombarding you guys with a lot. All I'm trying to say is that I think we should boycott dystopia, stop taking on these terrible stories about how technology is going to ruin everything. It is not true. If you look on long time horizons in all of human history, technology always wins. When we discover something that works, we develop it, we make it cost effective. You can stop it for a couple generations, but eventually the kids figure out that it's awesome and they make it happen. My daughter never heard of Chernobyl. She's going to build nuclear reactors, right? Whoever invented the wheel was probably assassinated. I think we killed off all the people with wheels for a couple of generations. And then some kids are like, screw you, dad. Wheels are cool. Now we have wheels. So look, technology will win in the long run. And on long time horizons, humans actually do make good decisions and we do the right thing. But man, it's tough in the short run. We often screw it up pretty badly. So anyway, those are the things that I think are worth having in your heads. And then I'm going to stop there and we can talk about, how some of this, these ideas can be relevant to you guys in what you're working on.
Pablos, thank you so much for going through that. One of the things, two questions. The first question is, why on earth the Sam Altman and Elon pretty negative about AI, and they're wanting to add, core code that would prevent, AI from hurting humans. Well, what are your thoughts on that? What are we missing?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think look, smart people. Oops. Uh-oh, lost a camera. Smart people are not necessarily smart about everything. Just because I know about nuclear reactors doesn't mean that you should take my advice on, who to vote for or where to get daycare for your kids or any of that stuff. I think that we have a real problem now where every computer nerd is trying to become a philosopher. And so I don't know that they're going to be good at that. And they're also susceptible to the same, story thing. These are people who, by their own admission, grew up on science fiction. There's a lot of dystopian stories there. There's a lot of scary stories. Humans are optimized for the scary stories. Remembering a positive story doesn't buy you anything. Remembering a story you heard about tigers eating you alive might buy you your life. So that's a cognitive bias that I think people have. So it's really important to keep that in mind. I think there's a spectrum of things going on. for Sam Altman, I think it is very self-serving to have this kind of story about how AI could go terribly wrong and that we need him to save us from it. For Elon, I think he's just mostly driven by this kind of extrapolation engine in his brain where he sort of figures, well, I mean, for everything he does, he tries to extrapolate out, 1,000 years and figure out how to prevent the problem that's coming in 1,000 years, which is great. I'm generally for that, but I think that he's a little ahead of the curve on this. We are nowhere near having an AGI. We do not know what that is. We don't know how to make it. I think that there's a lot that, what we're experiencing now is not really a breakthrough. We had a breakthrough in deep learning maybe 15 years ago. Transformers made that a lot more plausible. Maybe 5 years ago now, but the real breakthrough is just that computers got fast. We got computers to be so fast and so powerful that we can finally do this stuff, and that's exciting. But it's still very simplistic how we do it, and so probably in a year or two, somebody will we rebranded machine learning as AI. We're going to rebrand AI as AGI in a couple of years, so that somebody else can raise $1 billion. But fundamentally, it is way too soon to get terrified about these things, and I think that they are, the current body count for AI sits at something like 0. So I just don't think, I think it's very disingenuous to get people wound up over the fears and the harms. If there's a problem, the problem is with how humans use the AI. And that is fundamentally like every other tool, right? I can use a hammer to smash your head. I can use it to build you a home. So this is a tool, and it's not the tool's fault. It's up to humans to decide that they want to do something positive with the hammer or do something positive with the AI. So we wield these tools, and we're at the beginning of learning to wield them well. There will be a bunch of bad actors, and we will eventually sort that out and figure out how to, let them get, less done and get the good actors to get more done. And this happens every time a new technology comes along. So we'll sort it out in the long run. It just is frustrating in the moment because you have, unfortunately, our bad actors are people who are trying to use these scary stories to advance their own business
agenda.
model. So,
So speaking of tools, from projects, in healthcare to construction projects to the space station, how do you see AI disrupting just project management in general?
Yeah, so I think the fundamental inflection here, that what's changed is, so with computers, for our whole life, the relationship with the computer, like if you're a computer, if you're a programmer or even somebody making a spreadsheet, you are expressing to the computer a very discrete set of steps that you want it to follow. Project management is that, we want to say, what's the goal? What are the steps we need to follow to get there? And we're doing the best to the best of our ability. We're making good choices about those things. That was what I was calling small data. That's the old version, right? So now our toolkit has changed. And so the fundamental difference here is that the computer, it's not always true, but essentially the way to think about it is the computer can go game out and try every possibility for how to get to the goal, right? And it can show you the ones that succeed and throw out the ones that won't get there. And then, every time we get a new bit of data, we can run all the simulations again, recalculate. It's just like, that's why I use Google Maps as an example. Recalculate. It's like, we got some new data, hit traffic, boom, recalculate. Oh, we got some new data, road closure, boom, recalculate. So project management going forward, it's exciting because over the next 5 years, really, all the tools you use will change. Microsoft Project will radically be overhauled. You will end up with Project, you won't make a Gantt chart, it'll make it for you. You'll feed it data sources, you'll feed it goals, you'll feed it objectives, you'll feed it milestones, you'll feed it resources, but it'll go figure out, here's the possible Gantt chart. The one you made is some bullshit that may not have been possible anyway. You don't know, but it's going to show you these are the possible Gantt charts, right? This is what could be done, and it'll show you what variables you're allowed to tune. It'll show you which decisions you have to make, right? And that's going to be much better because, think about it this way. Look, think of like, when Congress passes a bill, it's 800 pages and no congressman has read it, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't find out for years to come after that congressman has not been reelected that, oh, this didn't have the desired effect. But now we're going to be able to go ask the computer, oh, yeah, before you pass that bill, let's just ask the computer, what's likely to happen? And it'll go read the bill and it'll go tell you, oh, the Affordable Health Care Act is actually going to make healthcare a lot more expensive, but it's also going to make it more accessible. Like, oh shit, that's great to know before we go past those bills. Maybe we can tune it. Maybe we can, go affect how we make those bills do the job that we want them to do. And so, obviously that's going to be better. It's going to take us a century to get there in government probably, but we're going to get there in business over the next 5-10 years, right? I showed you how we got there 10 years ago, 15 years ago in epidemiology, just because we had an early start on these technologies, but this is going to permeate every business. And that's really, when you hear about AI now, even though the emphasis is on LLMs, the truth is AI is coming to help every business and to help the things that you're doing. And it's coming because it can help you make better decisions.
Awesome. It seems like we have a question here. Vivek, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to read it?
I can read it. It says right here in the chat from Vivek, wouldn't project managers still need to tune the data fed into the AI engine that shows likely outcomes? So PMs will really need to change what they do. That's a really good point. So when you look at what are the ingredients of an AI, you got the data, and the data is critically important, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then you got the algorithms, and the algorithms is again the formula, the what you're applying to that data, and there's a symbiosis here where they get trained on each other. So you start with, so if you think about like how is Tesla's AI trained? Well, they collected video from billions now of miles of cars driving around, right? And a lot of that's redundant. So you throw it out and you reduce it to like, okay, what are all the weird things that happened? Like, and now, all the weird things where like a cat ran in front of the car or a tree fell or, some strange thing that's rare, but important. So now you're training so that now a Tesla knows how to handle lots and lots of weird cases, right? And all the normal ones as well. So if you tried to train, and we can see this difference right now, Tesla's way ahead of all its competitors because they have more data, right? So the competitors don't have the fleet of Teslas. There's millions of Teslas out there collecting data for them. Competitors don't have that. They have hundreds or something of cars, maybe thousands collecting data. It's not enough of a data set to be able to become good at driving the way Teslas are. So they're trying to solve it with synthetic data. So now they basically use a video game engine to generate a whole lot of fake driving data and come up with, random possible failures and stuff. And that's a way of bridging the gap. We don't know which is better, but so far it looks like the real data is working better. So these are things that you have to take into account when training an AI. And it is critically important. And I can't emphasize this enough. You can fool yourself so easily, just like with a spreadsheet. Every spreadsheet you ever make turns into an exponential graph about how we all get to be trillionaires. right? That's not that's the same thing happens in AI, but you can really bury the story deep enough that you won't know why you're fooling yourself. So it is very difficult. This gets solved better and better over time with more data, with better data, and with what we call reinforcement learning. And so that's basically where we take the positive outcomes and we feed that back to the machine and say, okay, this looks good, that looks like shit, don't ever do that again. You know, the more we can reinforce them, the better. And so you can see that happening in ChatGPT. They use a lot of reinforcement learning. And so they were able to get to a point where, okay, the thing is actually performing pretty well now, because we were able to say, yeah, stop doing that weird shit, stop talking about Hitler or Nazis, you know, stuff like that. And so now we have this AI that's sort of, you know, what they wanted. It's not really what I wanted because it's pretty G-rated, but it is what they wanted. And so it's possible to tune these things over time. You can, you know, we talk about bias in AI, and largely what we're talking about is the bias inherited by training on data from humans that were biased, right? That's really what bias in AI is about. But the truth is, you know, we have a version of that that's even more sinister, which is going forward, we're biasing the AI because we're training it to do, you know, do the things that we think are valuable or correct going forward. And so you can see that in ChatGPT right now. It's becoming a Californian, right? It's not becoming it's becoming a median Californian. It's not becoming a median Earthling. And so, you know, that's what OpenAI wants, but it is likely to be rejected by a lot of other societies that think Californians are a little skewed on what's important in the world. So anyway, that's just an example. Yeah.
So just a time check. We just have 1 minute left.
Oh wow, I'm so long-winded. Sorry, guys.
I'll ask you the last question, and you briefly touched upon when Ian asked some questions about project management and AI. How do you see the role of a project manager in 5 years when all the AI tools are out? What kind of skill set do they need to have that's different from what we have today as a project manager skill set?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm trying to talk you through the fundamentals. These will not change. So I think the things I'm trying to explain to you guys in this video will always be true. And you can kind of come back to that as your ground truth for what we're talking about with these technologies, so they aren't overwhelming. And then going forward, you're going to be bombarded with a zillion new tools, a zillion new approaches and methodologies and all this stuff. And really what you want to be looking for is fundamentally, I'm trying to make better decisions. That's what project management is really about. How do we make better decisions that get us to our goals faster, cleaner, cheaper, in a more humane fashion? So then evaluate all the things that are coming to you and say, look, is this really helping me to make better decisions? And if so, and then from there you can say, does it need better data? Do I need to train the algorithms better? Those kinds of things. And you know, you'll over time be equipped with a better and better toolkit.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't think I could have talked any faster.
No,
Hopefully you guys get
perfect.
something out of that.
No, I think
thank
Can
you
I
so
ask
much.
one more question?
Sure,
Sure. I can
ask one more question.
Sure.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Marissa.
Marissa, go ahead.
Thank you, Pablos. I've heard a statement in one of the conferences that I've attended, because on the concern that PMs will be replaced by AI. Do you agree that it's not a job displacement, but more a task displacement?
Yeah, it varies depending on the industry that we're in, but we're always real quick to get wound up about the idea of technologies in general destroying jobs. And there's really, from a high level, meaning, you know, if you sort of average it out over time, we always make more jobs, right? If you think of that first chart I showed you, we basically made like 7 billion jobs in the last century, Okay. So overall, we're not destroying jobs. That's a misnomer. If you remember a few years ago, reading all these articles in the paper about how self-driving cars are coming, therefore self-driving trucks are coming, and we're going to put 250,000 truck drivers out of business. Not a single truck driver has been put out of business. There are 100,000 open truck driver jobs in America right now that we can't fill because nobody wants to be a truck driver. So we're telling ourselves the wrong story. Now, for PMs, what does it mean? I think you should look at these as new superpowers. These are tools for you to learn to wield that will help you be better at your job, right? And in almost every case, that is true. Now, to be fair, there is some collateral damage. Some jobs do disappear. Usually, we just stop hiring new people. We stop growing or we slow down our growth in certain job areas for a while. It doesn't mean everybody gets fired overnight, right? What it means is that we have to make a transition and some of those jobs change over time. That is an important thing that needs to happen. It always is. And you want to be really compassionate to people who do lose their jobs, or to people who do get displaced, or who aren't able to do the thing that they prepared for or trained for, or do the career that they thought they were getting into. We want to be compassionate and help those people out, but it is actually quite a bit more rare than people imagine. For project managers, I don't think there's any risk at all. We need people who can help us figure out how to get shit done. That's just fundamental, right? And we need people to translate between the tools and the humans. There's always a lot of people who don't know how to use the tools, who don't know how to figure out how to get a project done, who do need help understanding their position. Project managers are critical for that, and I don't see that going away. So I think you guys are all safe, but I would say you want to think of your job, project management is a misnomer. You guys are in the business of helping make good decisions about how to get something done. And these are tools to help you.
Okay.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we are 4 minutes over. Thank you, Pablos, for your time. And we enjoyed your...
Thank you so much, Pablos.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks you guys. Good luck.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good rest of the afternoon.